Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show, everyone. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. And everyone, hey, welcome into the program. Today on the show, we have the one, the only Mr. Nathan Evans, Popzara magazine managing editor, and of course, correspondent here for the program. We have a lot of different topics that we're going to discuss today. Everything from, let's see, I have a full list here from, of course, Uncharted 4, a lot of video game stuff, movies, being managing editor of Popzara, of course, they really specialize in, him and his team of writers really specialize in breaking down movies, books, cartoon TV shows, video games, all that and more, of course, product reviews, and hey, they even have their own podcast. So they really span it all when it comes to entertainment and a nice blend of technology as well, which is what makes, of course, them a suitable guest for here on Computer America. Now, with that being said, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, links, podcasts. If you can't listen to us live in IRN, then, hey, the podcast is the second best place to check us out. Check out the live video portion. That should be up there as well. And, pretty much anything that we do here with Computer America, you can find there on our website. So with all that being said, why don't we go ahead and get our guests in and get talking and, have a nice relaxing Friday. So everyone, and again, I hope that you have a fantastic weekend. I know that a lot of people are about to head out on a long 3-day weekend, and we hope that you drive safe, you have safe fun out there, and of course you enjoy today's show. So once again, managing editor popzara.com, you can check that out, and of course, correspondent here for Computer America, Nathan. How you been? Welcome back on.
What's up, Ben? And relaxing and me have never usually gone well together.
Some people work better under pressure.
Let's just say I consider this like a traumatic experience. So you test the skills. But no, thank you, and happy Memorial Day weekend to everybody out there listening. Got a quick question. It's not a story, and it's not a news story. It's kind of old, but I was wondering, did you guys ever talk about Microsoft's asking people to vote on their new default font? Did you guys ever talk about that?
No, I didn't even hear about this. I'm assuming it's through some kind of website, and it's like a poll, I'm assuming.
Yeah, they're actually soliciting advice on to replace Calibri as their default font in their software. And for those who don't know, because this is a tech show, so I'm probably speaking with brothers and sisters, but fonts are important, fonts are different, and I don't want to waste too much time on it because it's been going on for a month. But basically, Calibri is their default font in a lot of their Office products. Mm-hmm. And the, was it 5? It's Tenorite, Bierstadt, Skeena, Seaford, and Grandview. Had you guys talked about this, I would have let you know, and this would have made a lot more sense. Maybe I should have asked you before, but I think I've made my choice. I think Microsoft should pick. I think they should keep Calibri, to be honest with you. But no, I think having tested all these fonts for the last five or so weeks, I go with Grandview.
I was just looking at Grandview. It's very distinguished. The letters are a little bit thinner, but they're very, very noticeable. Some of these are kind of kind of swoopy and kind of thicker and thinner. I also prefer kind of like a singular, thickness of font. So an A doesn't look too separated from an E, that kind of thing.
Well, it's like. The idea of typography and everything, it's an old thing. And Microsoft, I'll be honest with you, Microsoft has probably been the biggest instigator of font productivity of any company I've ever seen. They're really good at this. And but no, it's like the last time I remember people talking about a default font was when Amazon was unveiling one of their tablets, and they had their own homemade font, and they bragged about it. I forget what it's called. It's pretty good. But no, I mean, the font can change the width of a document. It can change the way things look when they're bold. There's a lot of things to consider. And before anybody out there's laughing and thinking, oh, he's crazy, look at that. Use Comic Sans for your resume and see what happens.
Comic Sans is definitely one of the ones that people always joke about, that if you try to have something of impact, like you were saying, fonts convey different meaning, and Comic Sans is intentionally meant to be childlike and rudimentary. So obviously putting serious maybe office place messages in Comic Sans just doesn't really make a lot of sense. Looking at them here, of course, on the video portion we have them right there. And, by and large, at first glance, all 5 of these look like they were in the same font and they were just kind of highlighting and, sending a message. No, those are the 5 different fonts in, kind of the 5 different deals. I got to say that of them, just looking at them, Tenorite does not, this does not inspire joy. Beardstat is not bad. Beardstat.
Its name is too foreign.
Oh yeah, well,
yeah.
Grandview's pretty good, but it also kind of everything's just kind of square, if that makes sense. Like the letters are very measured between. It's the kerning is not to my liking.
It's not. It's like I said. I think they should just keep Calibri. There's no reason to replace it. It does its job. It works fine. It's got a nice width. It's got a nice look. So.
But you and I both know this is obviously a PR push, and hey, we're talking about it, so it's working to some extent. As they say, Calibri will always be one of the choices. So if you feel like you want to do that, you can change the default back to this font. The font's not going away. Neither has Times New Roman.
Not.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny, if I can reveal a little bit, my personal favorite font that I use when I do document stuff, like when I do printed document work for my clients or for myself, I use Georgia. Georgia's pretty good.
Really?
But for my personal font, what I do when I'm actually typing my own documents for myself, for nobody's else's eyes but my own, I use Gil Sans.
Gil Sans. I don't even know what that one is.
It's hard because I use Google Docs a lot for quite a lot of stuff, and so Google doesn't have access to all the fonts that you normally would find because, well, fonts cost money. But Gil Sans is part of the Google family, so if you want to see what Gil Sans look like, you can test it out in Google Docs.
There you go. Yeah, I have it right here, and it's that one seems nice. That is the font that you would see on the front of a college textbook. Very, very clean, easy to distinguish. I would dare say distinguished. So yeah, it fits you well. I can see that.
It's nice. It's separated. I never realized it before, but with people with certain vision problems, like fonts can, you can have a little blurring. So here we are talking about fonts.
There's always the dyslexic font, if people aren't familiar with that one as well. Some people find that one easier to read.
That's true.
Yeah, so there's a lot of weight to fonts. Not just about bolding or anything like that, but actual. It can make your computing experience all the easier. And something that I think that. We're going to move on from fonts now, but it is something that I think people overlook in terms of kind of quality of life and just, ease of use. You can make fonts. Yeah.
Final thought. I come from the days of when desktop publishing was a little different, where you didn't really, there was no such thing as default. And when you start looking in books, next time you read a book, an actual paper book, read the front and the back. They usually tell you which font the book is presented in. Or, it was presented in such and such typeface. But the fact of the matter is that fonts are one of those things that we sort of give up on when we have our devices. Like you said, Calibri, you can change it back if you want to.
Right.
But so much of the digital world, which is supposed to be customized to your heart's content, we sort of give up. Like you mentioned, you could switch the font back to default, but if you try switching like the browser on a Windows machine, it'll fight you a little bit. It'll say, "Are you sure you want to do that?" Yeah,
Right.
I do, but nah, yeah. It's just we just give up so much, and because ultimately, I mean, that's what civilization's built on, Ben. It's built on
People
fonts.
giving up. I like that.
People giving into the mob.
Absolutely.
Just accept it.
Absolutely. So speaking of the mob, and of course, actually before the show, I had a little bit of time to kill, and I was reading Christian Sterling's review of Army of the Dead. Something that I saw, and I think that really any kind of, I would say, major movie, but this, I would count it, any major movie that Netflix puts up. I mean, it's not going to win any awards or anything like that, but everyone's going to see it. So it was on my radar. But
it's not going to
Christian
win
didn't
any
like
awards.
it.
It's not going to win any, when a Netflix movie is not going to win any awards unless they win the awards. So it's like 2 years ago, it's ridiculous now to think that there was a fight between AMC theaters and Netflix, but now like Netflix won that battle and theaters are on life support. But Army of Darkness is one of those films Army of the Dead. Sorry, I was thinking of a better movie. By the way, did you hear Evil Dead 4 is going into production?
Evil Dead 4, no.
Yeah, Evil Dead 4, produced by Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, not starring Bruce Campbell. It's another reboot continuation. They're going to have a female lead. They've done this 3 times. Look, if you don't have Bruce Campbell, don't bother. That's the reason. That's the only thing people want to see. But anyway, haven't seen this film. I've seen the first 15 minutes of it, and I'll tell you why later, because I was testing a new device, which I put on your list.
There you go.
By all accounts, this movie is divisive. But then again, we're kind of in a Zack Snyder divisive world right now because of the Justice League that came out a little while ago. So yeah, have you seen it? You haven't seen Army of the Dead?
I have not seen it. Again, it was something that I wanted to watch, but I've been reading a lot of news about it between them CGIing certain characters in due to, obviously filming and COVID, that kind of thing. And just, the troubles of making...
It wasn't because of COVID. It wasn't because of COVID.
It wasn't.
It was because of...
Yeah?
No, it was a little touchy-feely with people. Let's just say that.
Really?
Yeah. It's kind of what happened a couple years ago with that Ridley Scott movie with Kevin Spacey, where he was in the trailers, and then they phased him out in like 2 weeks with who's the guy who they replaced him with? I'll have to look for it. He won the Oscar for it now.
Yeah, and so and touchy-feely, like Zack Snyder was touchy-feely?
No. Unfortunately, no. And the actor who they replaced, I don't know his name.
Okay, I get it.
He was CG'd out, and Tig Notaro was CG'd in, and they had to film her scenes on a green screen. They did some set, and I haven't seen it, but apparently, though, most people think it was pretty well done. Some people think you can see the seams.
Some people, and from what I was reading, some people are thinking like, these characters are acting so, kind of stilted, and they're acting so, kind of not quite right, and they think that the acting's bad, but no, once they realize what it is, they're like, oh, that's what it is, and they attribute it to different things. So that's thank you for giving me the heads up on that. So that's why a CGI character. Yeah. You know what's funny though? We've talked about it on your show before. I don't think this is as impressive a technology as it might have been, because if you think about it, the Marvel movies, the DC movies, most movies in general now, I mean, everything's composited, like everything's CG'd anyway. So it's like, when you see the end of Avengers Endgame and there's like 5,000 characters on the screen, it's like, how did they get them all together? Well, they didn't. So it can't be that difficult to CG a character in now. I mean, not to discount it, but... Right. There's always the image of Guardians of the Galaxy, and of course Rocket the Raccoon, and you of course have Drax there, kind of petting Rocket the Raccoon. And of course, this is what it looks like in real life: is someone wearing a morph suit, and of course, behind the scenes, it would be much more awkward than it is. But you're right.
By the way, the movie is called All the Money in the World. By the way,
All the 2017.
Money in the World. Yeah, and Kevin Spacey played the character. He was CG'd out, and the great Christopher Plummer was CG'd in.
Yeah,
so,
there you go.
There you go.
Yeah, and so you're right. It's not it's not completely unheard of technology, but the fact that they're doing it kind of on command for any film, not one that it's kind of meant to do that with, very, very cool. At the same time, though, again, your reviewer did not like it. Let's face it, it's a Netflix film, so even if every person in the world has said this is the most horrible movie ever, it should never been made, blah blah blah, it's free, to most people who have Netflix already, and they're probably still going to watch it.
Well, you see, there's that word again, free. Included with your subscription, unless
free if
you're
you have Netflix included in,
unless you're bumming your uncle's password, then it's totally free. So
yeah.
I was excited about this film at first. I'm a huge zombie fan, but I'm a huge George Romero zombie fan. Mm-hmm. And Zack Snyder started his movie career with a remake of Dawn of the Dead back in 2004, and it was pretty decent. The special effects were really good. Story wasn't very good. But long story short, this was supposed to be his return. This is his return to directing since leaving DC, the DC world. I haven't seen it yet. And I thought it looked really good, but I was really surprised to hear about the technical issues with the dead pixels that has taken over the conversation.
Yeah, let's talk about that real quick. And what was that? And of course, talking about dead things in a zombie flick, that's always, at least an effective
This
flick.
is what's known as ironic.
Yeah, so what happened?
Long story short, Zack Snyder was documenting his making of this film, and this is the first time he's done his own cinematography. And before we get off, have you ever heard of a YouTube channel called Red Letter Media?
Red Letter Media.
Yeah, they're very famous. You probably know them from the 6-hour, 2-hour Star Wars: The Phantom Menace review that was famous a couple of years ago. They do a lot of the movie criticism. They're actually very respectable in this regard.
Gotcha.
They did. They have a show called Review where they talk about films that are in theaters and whatnot, and they actually did a very interesting look at why the dead pixels are the way they are, because they're all film editors. Mm-hmm. So I suggest if you want a comprehensive view, go look at the Red Letter Media version of this. However, if you want my opinion of it, and I'm a total novice, he was using a mix match of older lenses and digital cameras, and since he was doing his own cinematography, it probably wasn't configured correctly. And I was surprised to learn, just like a monitor can have dead pixels, digital cameras can have dead pixels, especially when they're not calibrated. And the fact that this film made it through the filming, through the editing bay, through the production, through the distribution, and this escaped everyone's eyes. Ben, we've talked about this before. If you want to make sure your movie's flawless, pay a bunch of nerds in pizza boxes and Mountain Dew, and they will find every damn problem of your movie. Within one view, they will have it all done, and you'll save yourself you won't even have to pay them in money. You pay them in pizza, and they will do it.
It's hard to believe that any kind of modern day movie editing process. Again, I have to blame COVID on this one, that they were sending it between people, and maybe everyone there thought, oh, maybe this is a problem with my screen, and it's not really something worth noticing, and it just made it from screen to screen to screen. I'm sure if everyone was working in the same area, in the same office building, they could say, oh, this is happening on everyone's screen at the same time. That's the only thing I can assume, because it looks like they were talking about here in this article that you linked, using like a Canon 50mm with a particular lens, and then they were using a digital camera on this one, and that kind of thing. I mean, it sounds like it was just visual artifacts carried over to the end product.
Again, the nerds saw it as soon as it came on. The nerds are never wrong. Well, they're wrong about everything, but they're right about the technical details. And it's like, the fact is, but this happens so much. This kind of stuff, like not the dead pixels, but like the flaws in film, the mistakes, like it's usually something funny, like someone, Star Trooper bangs his head, or a gladiator's wearing a watch, or something like that. But this is interesting because we just talked about this film made a lot of fuss about digitally inserting a human being into scenes,
right? And
yet a pixel got lost, and it's just so funny to me because I have 2 monitors, and on my second monitor there's a dead pixel. And I've had this monitor for a year, and every time I look at the screen, I see that dead pixel. And after a while, I blur it out. But the first 5 minutes is always like, oh, that pixel. Oh, okay, it's gone. But it's still there.
I like how the AV Club and how they ended their article with we're left with the weird, mysterious question of are they stuck in a time loop, and why the heck, not heck, but you know what I mean? Why the heck did Zack Snyder put Sean Spicer in this movie? But it seems like we won't know what's up with the white dots until Netflix spills the proverbial beans. So there you go. It's I mean, you live and you learn, but this also seems like something that you would learn pretty early on in your filming career, which is someone said turn off the auto adjustments in the camera settings. So,
well, my film nerd friends, Christian, by the way, the guy who reviewed the film, he's actually an amateur filmmaker, and we had talked just a few weeks ago about digital filmmaking,
right?
And what's so funny, and one of the things he didn't really complain about in the review was the shallow depth of field. And if you have any filmmakers who are listening, they'll know exactly what that means. It's that when you record with film, when you record with digital versus actual film, the quality of the film is different. The way light captures everything. And apparently, Zack Snyder is no good at this. This was the first movie he's ever made where he didn't control the depth of field, and so it ends up looking a little bit like a YouTube video that's been filmed in 4K. So,
yeah,
I mean.
The depth of field, of course, is when everything's up close. If it's up close and everything in the back is blurry and blah blah blah. And I would imagine that someone who works in cinema, you would want to have very very fine control over that. But not so much that one. But
we're not Netflix. We don't have billions of dollars to waste on zombie movies. So
well, they do have billions. They do have billions of dollars, except they're spending it on 1,000 movies instead of just making a couple good ones. They're spending 1,000. That kind of money on thousands of TV shows and whatever, because no one wants to license Netflix their content. They all want to make their own streaming service. So
you want to see something fun?
Actually, real quick, since you were last on though, there was also AT&T spinning off Time Warner Media to Discovery since you were last on. So another streaming service is coming. Yay!
That's what we all want is more. No, we don't want more.
So
you're on the Popzara site. If you're on the Popzara site, so. You see that story right there with his latest podcast? Let me show you let me show you this. So
the fantasy blending?
Yeah, look at that picture. Look at the high quality picture on the right. See that? It's like 4K quality. Look how nice and sharp that is.
Looks a little blurry to me, but what do I know?
Yeah, this is the best version of that picture I could find. Yeah. It is really hard trying to photo capture 80s movies. It is really hard because this movie always looked blurry because of the composite effects. So if anybody's reading this or you're listening to that podcast and you're like, wow, that's a crappy picture, blame Wolfgang Peterson. Don't blame me.
Right.
My Photoshop skills can only do so much.
Well, no, and of course, it's good enough for the small thumbnail that would appear on your, on your site. But with that being said, since you were last on, a lot has happened, and we have a lot of different articles that you submitted as well. But since we just covered that one, I wanted to talk about one that was a little bit different, and I don't know how you land on this, but if you haven't heard, Nathan, and for everyone else out there, Epic Games and Apple have been having a bit of a spat. And yes, the sigh, that's perfect. And one thing I always want to highlight before I start talking about this is don't think it's David versus Goliath, because David didn't come with a $5 billion war chest worth of lawyers themselves. Don't get me wrong, Apple's a $2 trillion company, and Epic is a $50 billion company. But yeah, this has a lot of implications for apps and iOS in general and Apple in general. So I found this article here, Nathan, from The Verge, and I thought we'd just get a quick reaction from you on each one of these things that we quote unquote learned about this whole thing. So if you have some time, would you like to go through this?
I saw that article. I did not send it to you because I think the trial is done, right? So
the judge is going to take a number of months to parse through everything and make his decision, or weeks or months. But the actual testimony and evidence and all that kind of thing is done. But the ruling is not over. The ruling has not happened.
I've given you my opinion of this before, and because I don't think that this trial or this hearing I don't think the decision is going to be based on the merits. I think it's going to be based on politics, and I think it's going to be based on perceptions. There are people who have already decided. There are people who have already decided on Apple's favor, and like in my view, there's people who have decided on Epic's favor, and it's because, like you said, Apple's become the standard bearer for all things, the way Microsoft used to be in the '90s.
Yeah,
like you've seen Apple taken to task again and again and again because Apple's the biggest. They have the most to lose. My opinion of this is exactly the same as it was 2 months ago when we talked about it, and I'll say my piece, and then we can go through these things.
right.
It's like Spotify claiming that they can't compete against Apple Music when they have more subscribers, because they don't have, because Apple's not a default. But that's nonsense, because Spotify is available on more platforms. They have more artists. They have they have more subscribers. Like Apple's not a very good case of a monopoly when you have more subscribers than them.
Right.
What we're concerned about in the Epic case too is has Apple been using their monopoly status? And I'll be honest with you, yeah, I think they have. But here's the thing though. They control this box. It's called your iPhone or your iPad.
The
right?
iOS, right.
They get to decide who gets to play. Now, as a console gamer, I'm used to this. Because, and here's the thing. It really goes back to the gaming idea. It's like, why is Epic complaining now? Epic has made billions off the iOS platform, billions. And I honestly think it's because of one thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's because Epic owns a competing service on the PC called Epic Game Store, where they're also competing against Steam, where they're also competing against anybody else. I don't think this case is based on the merit. I think it's based on crippling competition. The idea that they can have a legal action against Apple that will help corrupt this idea of exclusivity, and the idea that there needs to be certain parameters around Apple's walled garden. Yeah. They want to let weeds in the garden. And I'll say this, I have an iPhone, and I know a lot of people with iPhone. We get considered stupid. We're not stupid, and we're not lazy. I just don't want to have to worry about viruses and malware. And last time I was on this show, I made the argument that Apple allows people to save web apps to their desktop. Can I be honest? I've learned a little bit since then, so I want to correct my opinion.
Go for it.
It sucks. So you can do, like, for example, Microsoft allows you to save a desktop icon on your iOS so you can play Xbox, or what is it called? Xbox Game Pass, their streaming service.
Yeah.
But when you're doing that, you're not able to use a lot of the tools that you could if it was a regular app. You're not allowed to use APIs that accelerate. You have a degraded service.
Right.
So here's how I view it, and this is my thought on the Apple thing. I think Apple is probably going to be found guilty of antitrust violations, but I don't think they should be, because I think Apple's between a rock and a hard place where their responsibility is to billions of users to provide them with this service, and it's served most developers very well. They provide the services. For example, they provide the cache service, they provide the payout service, they provide the distribution service. They're asking 30%, and I think competition is starting to lessen. I think they're going to start taking less and less. I don't think their 30-70 split is as generous as like Amazon's or Microsoft's new splits. But at the end of the day, I think competition will take care of this. But at the same time, Epic has behaved unbearably deceptive. They have violated their terms of service, not only on Apple, they've done this on Google's Google Play service, where they've told people to sideload, which is, no, don't do that. That's like getting a vaccine in the middle of an alleyway. Don't do it. But it's I think Apple's probably going to be found guilty of something. There's probably going to be some sort of compromise between the two.
I'm on the opposite. I think that Apple's going to be found, and at this point, like every legal challenge that they've kind of brought up has been brought up by different companies in different court cases. And don't get me wrong, Epic is, kind of piling in and using past evidence to push push this idea again. I feel like everything that Epic is accusing Apple of, they've already been, taken to court over and won multiple times. So I think Apple's going to stay. Yeah.
I mean, it could be. I mean, you could be right, but I mean, I don't think it's fair. I mean, you look at this, and what we're finding out, though, is we're finding out that the magical walled garden has warriors keeping out the bugs. Like Apple's been predatory about keeping out competition.
Well, let's talk about some of the things that we found, that we have found out through the court case, because, it really goes to that point where, the first one that this article points out is that iMessage, and I've never really considered iMessage to be that big of an appeal. Like, I get it.
Definitely.
And, just to me personally, it's instead of SMS that's green, iMessage is blue. Like, I never really found all that much value in it.
Well,
yeah.
Let me say this. One of the two things that kept me from going back to the Windows laptop for a while were iMessage and iBooks. And Microsoft rectified that when they made this glorious transition to ebooks on Windows. They've since taken it away. But iMessage is sort of a godsend, because all you have to do is look at Google's mix-match mess to understand how Google doesn't understand messaging at all. iMessage is, I can't say it on your show, but it rhymes with hit. iMessage really is good. It's one of the best pieces of software that Apple's ever made, and it works really, really well among their things. When I don't have iMessage anymore. I have an iPad and I have an iPhone. So when I want to do iMessage, I have to put down this beautiful keyboard, and I have to go to my phone and fight with predictive text.
Right.
A lot of people hate me right now because of predictive text. But long story short, iMessage is great, and I would love it if iMessage was on Windows. But there's no. But you realize really quickly they're not going to do that.
Right.
It's not going to happen.
And again, that was the first thing that they kind of pointed out here, was that Eddie Q was pushing for it, and then they have Phil Schiller, who are both kind of high end executives over at Apple, and they both in 2013, 2016, I'm sure it's come up since then, that they wanted to turn iMessage into a WhatsApp style messaging platform. So essentially, any device, you would download iMessage, and of course then you would lock them into the ecosystem. You'd get all that good stuff, sell them, whatever. But yeah, Apple didn't want to do that because they thought iMessage was a big enough pull that if you could get iMessage on any phone, not just an iPhone, then that would be one less reason to buy an iPhone. So, and exactly. It sounds like you agree.
Yeah, Apple's not a software company; they're a hardware company,
right?
And it's like Nintendo. Like if we're going to do the video game analogy, it's like Nintendo putting Mario Odyssey on the PlayStation. Then why would you need to buy a Switch? I mean, yeah. I'm not saying that I wouldn't love to see Mario Odyssey, but can I tell you why this is important? Like nobody ever considers this. One of the stories I gave you was about Sony putting Uncharted 4 on the PC.
Right.
And we just saw Days Gone on the PC. We now have almost all the Sony exclusives coming to PC. So you ask yourself, well, why buy a PlayStation when you can get a PC? Well, that's because you get to play the games now. There's not a 5-year gap. But hear me out though. So you say to yourself, well, wouldn't Nintendo make more money with software? And the answer is no. They would sell a lot of Mario games. They would. But what would happen is they'd become dependent on being a third-party license, which means they wouldn't have the creative control over the software. They wouldn't have the creative control over the hardware. They'd have to do resources for this and that. By allowing a company, what's the word I'm looking for? The luxury of developing their own software and hardware, you get to see the vision of the company thrive. And in some ways, it's worked well for Nintendo. It's worked well for Apple. I mean, Apple tried being a software company before. It resulted in very bad software. That's why you don't see Safari on Windows anymore. It's why the PC version of iTunes is junk. It's like you don't see a lot of these things. You don't see FaceTime over there. I mean, all you have to do is look at cross-party software like Skype. Look what Microsoft's done to Skype. They've rendered it almost mute at some points. It wasn't until
one thing that I have been kind of seeing lately, and there's it's very profitable to be negative on in messaging, especially when it comes to video games and why they aren't good or things like that. I'm not saying that you're doing it. I'm saying that I've seen a lot of other people have this opinion that whenever a game isn't good, they blame creative control, they blame investors, they blame public versus private entities, that kind of thing. And I don't have all the information, but from what I'm hearing from things like who made Cyberpunk 2077, that was
CD Projekt Red.
CD Projekt Red. I've heard this about Activision. I've heard this about EA. I've heard this about so many other companies that I'm realizing that investors really aren't that keen on doing like creative decisions for these companies, and more so, and I believe you were actually the one to say it, so I'm taking a cue from you back in the day that said, development studios, sometimes they just put out crap games, And sometimes they are just horrible games, and you can't blame investors. You can't blame anyone else. Sometimes they just make crap games, and that's the end of it. You don't need to look at investment or money or anything like that. And that's how I'm feeling about that kind of thing with just in general what you're talking about. Sometimes development studios just suck, and maybe it's not the fault of PlayStation, Nintendo, or anything else.
There's something else though you need to take into account is that when you work for again, Sony is no different than Nintendo in this respect. They get to allow who's on their store, who doesn't. Mm-hmm. Microsoft gets to allow. So it's not like it's this total Wild West where you can publish whatever you want. It's not the PC.
Right.
So, for example, if Nintendo would have had to go through, let's just say Microsoft to get on their platform, if they had to go through PlayStation, I mean, look at the story today. I mean, what's the game that came out? What's the game they just announced? Borderlands 3. Cross-platform except for Sony, because Sony has their own priorities. So what Nintendo is allowed to do by being a first-party publisher and hardware maker is they get to do whatever they want. Better or worse. Maybe you don't have 4K. Maybe you don't have this sort of thing. Maybe Mario takes 2 years. Maybe you don't need a Breath of the Wild every year. But you look at software companies who make all their money on software. They eventually all become iterative companies where you need yearly versions or double yearly versions or DLC.
The Call of Duty version, yeah.
Well, it works for them. It works for Activision on that regard. And sometimes it doesn't, but it's hard to argue, though. It's really hard to argue that the company that makes its own hardware and software successfully, if they have good hardware and if they have good software, it's hard to argue with that success story. It's why everybody wants to do it and why so many people fail, because it's hard to do.
I mean, heck, that's why NVIDIA tried to, dabble in video game manufacturing and make their own hardware. And even a graphics card company went in on that. Anyways, moving on with the articles, just so we get this in, some kind of time. To, of course, PlayStation Fortnite, you were just talking about crossplay. Mm-hmm. It looks like, just as we saw before, when Xbox was the dominant player, they did not want crossplay. And now that PlayStation has been a dominant player for the last, 6, 7, 8 years, they did not want it because they saw it as, quote, a liability for their platform. They did not want cross-platform, kind of compatibility for Fortnite because, again, they saw it as a.
It's pretty much everything, though. I mean, this is. I mean, their cross-play moratorium extends to almost all their software. Mm-hmm. So it's a software thing. It's not like some magical. Honestly, Ben, you've been doing this a while. We've been playing. Macs and PCs could play well together for 20 years. I mean, it's not a hardware thing. You know, it's a software thing, and it's also a business thing.
Whenever you finally get it to work on an Apple computer, Apple can play very nicely with Windows. Very, very true. So there was that, and of course, like you said, that extends even today with Borderlands 3. Not being able to be cross-compatible, but there you have it. Number 3, Apple pulled out all the stops to keep Netflix selling subscriptions on the iPhone. And really, Nathan, that was the heart of Epic's complaint, and of course, Netflix's complaint back in the day was Apple takes 30% of any transaction that happens on their iPhone. If you subscribe to Netflix, you cancel your Netflix, or you, let's say you let it fall off, you cancel it, whatever, and then you resubscribe the same account, same service, same everything, but you happen to do it through an iPhone instead of through, instead of your PC at home, well, Apple gets 30% of that where normally they wouldn't. That argument has been tried before, and Apple came out on top again. So, but Apple, and this is why I mentioned on other shows, Apple will obviously make concessions to, or concessions. There we go. Apple will make concessions for multi-billion-dollar companies because not every app is going to have the same weight to throw around that Netflix will. So obviously, Apple.
Okay, we do need to make a caveat, though, is that Apple offers you to subscribe using their service. So, for example, if you were to subscribe through Netflix, if you subscribe to HBO Max, you're actually subscribing through iTunes. You're not subscribing through a credit card. So you're going through a third party. So you can physically go to Netflix on your iPhone and go to the website and put your credit card in and do it. But if you're using Apple's luxury service,
but if you get that iOS pop-up that says, would you like, that is the transaction.
My thought about this whole thing is that there should be some sort of waiver extension or maybe reduced subscription fee, which I think is probably going to come. But the only subscription I have on iOS that I use at all is Audible. I have an Audible subscription which is separate than in my Amazon. And so on Apple, what happens is I get points. I get, my monthly point, and they give me 1 credit a month.
Right.
But the app will tell me I can't use money. I have to use my credits.
Right.
But only on Apple. You know what I mean? So that's the compromise I make. So
yeah, there was something there that it actually just flew out of my head. You said something there that the payment thing and the waiver and the reduction, that kind of thing. I really like. It's funny enough, Epic with their Unreal Engine kind of strategy, where they like for the first million, of revenue, you're allowed to use their platform, the Unreal Engine 5, whatever, and you can. For free. You can play games. As soon as you earn over $1 million, you owe Epic a cut for using their engine. And then after a certain amount, you don't have to pay as much because you've, kind of quote unquote kind of paid your way. I feel like that's what Apple needs to do, where if certain apps are apps are bringing in, let's say 100, whatever, they can work on the numbers. Let's say the first $1 million in revenue, you get charged a certain amount, you're still up and coming, that kind of thing. Well and good. If you earn, let's say 1 million to 100 million, pay the 30%, whatever. That's how Apple makes their money. Anything over, I personally feel like 100 million, 200 million, whatever number they set, you've paid the bulk of how they make their business successful. Why not shave that down to 10% or 12% after a certain threshold?
They have to be careful though, because that model is based on insurance. It's actually called catastrophic coverage. Yeah. And if you've ever dealt with insurance companies, you pay a little bit, but then there's this wide gap where you pay nothing. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing though, and here's the problem with this, and this is not a problem that can't be solved, is that companies actually dread meeting that threshold, because if your profit margin is based on, okay, we're getting X amount of dollars per this, okay, so you say Epic's not going to charge me for $1 million, okay, so that you ride that into your business model, but then you hit that magic $1 million, and suddenly you have to account for all this new expenditure until you reach that. So your success becomes, it's almost more profitable not to sell $1 million. So, that's why you have to find the formula that works, because there's all these dividends that get paid out if you meet these thresholds. It's actually, you can make more money by being less successful. Right. So you have to be careful.
It just feels to me like, these companies are pumping in, and we saw this in the court filings with Epic, they were pumping in, hundreds of millions of dollars, and clearly, they are for using the same service, the same platform, they are getting charged way more for being on there. And of course, there's tons of other factors that go into this, but by and large, they're paying $300 million, whereas other companies aren't. I feel like there should be a maximum threshold before it starts to get throttled down, because clearly they're paying their way at some point.
Of course.
I feel like.
Yeah, I think one of the results of this is going to be a reevaluation of that. Definitely. Because a lot of this information was under NDA. Yeah. So now that we know about it, other companies now know the sweet deals that were being made to them. And one of the big antagonists was Microsoft, because Apple was very unfair to Microsoft with their gaming streaming things. Well, if Netflix can do it, why can't we do it? And Apple came up with this ridiculous, which I defended at the time, and I will a little bit now, but every single game on the Game Pass needs its own app storefront, which is absurd. You can't do that. Netflix doesn't have to do it. So.
And of course, talking about these numbers, just to put into context, number 4 of this article is saying that the App Store is profitable. Phil Schiller back in 2009 said, I don't know if the App Store was profitable, because I believe he honestly saw the App Store as something that made iOS function. That was what it was back in 2009 when the iPhone was first released. You needed the App Store to make the iPhone function. Nowadays, 2020, thanks to this court case, we now have proof that it made $60 billion in a year. This thing is wildly
I've said this.
profitable.
I've said this on your show for many years. I thought the App Store was the most innovative, most profitable thing Apple's done. The iPhone is a conduit to the App Store. The App Store has literally changed the way we look at software.
It has.
And people think, oh, it's just a storefront. No, it was the storefront. It was the storefront. It didn't exist before, and people forget. Like next time you're taking your Uber or you're ordering from Grubhub, or you're looking up your doctor notes or you're scanning a thing. Just remember that would not have been possible without a correlated store, and that's how it works. And by the way, Microsoft tried to copy it on Windows. They failed. Google's been the only other company that's been even remotely successful. It's hard running a digital storefront. Amazon does it. Amazon does it for commerce, but even they failed at application stores, and they've had like 4 of them. So it's not easy.
It's not, and of course, Apple is very well known. Well, at least now they should be known for having one of the most profitable. So number 5, by the way, Xbox, and we're not really going to get into this, but essentially what they're saying is that Xbox they sell their console at a loss, and then at the same time they also kind of produce their own hardware or their own software at a loss. Xbox is not that good at making money as Apple.
No, I don't understand why it's still around. Like I've said this before too. Like I don't want to. We talked about this ad nauseum. I don't understand how the Xbox is still around. I love the Xbox as a theory, but the damn thing doesn't make any money. Right. And the Xbox Series X has been, I don't want to say failure. It hasn't done well, and I don't know. I've said it before, and I'll say this before. If Microsoft transitions to a software version of Xbox, I wouldn't be surprised.
That might come with an update, which we don't have here, but I talked about this yesterday with Windows 10 having a new update. But really, the main update is going to be the Windows Store, which has existed for a while, but no one's ever used it. But yeah, the Windows Store is looking to be something more like a Steam or an Apple Store.
Useful. It's horrible right now.
For a change.
It's like a different store with a different programming language stapled onto Windows 10. It doesn't flow. It doesn't work really well.
No, and of course that might also be the fact that if you have ever used a PC before, you go to a company's website, you download their software, you run it, you're done. You don't wedge Microsoft into that. But of course, there's no reason that Windows could not be a part of that to make it faster, efficient, cheaper, that whole thing. There's no reason Windows and Microsoft can't be doing this. It's just they've never done it well. So,
can I say this final thought on that whole issue?
Sure.
When you buy into the Apple ecosphere, if you buy into the Apple mythos, then that is part of it. It's baked into it. Like Apple has basically bred non-complicity out of their programming language. Like you are designed to be funneled through this walled garden of experience. It's why Apple doesn't care about gaming anymore. It's why they have their own chips. Like it's basically a cult, but a very functional cult. Whereas Windows, like the whole appeal of Windows is the Wild Wild West. Like there's a reason why you can't see me, but I'm making a geographic thing with my hands. Like that's why the converse of software to virus is higher on Windows. Like you're going to get all the software you want, but you're going to get a lot of viruses. And with Apple, you're going to get a lot less software, but a lot less virus. And the same can apply to iPhone versus Google. And so that's the trade you make. That's the trade you make. Like you're going to, you don't get a lot of software on Apple, but you get really good software. But you get more
how
of
does
it.
Linux fit? I'm joking. Don't answer that.
Linux is the one controlling the strings.
There you go, the puppet master. Okay, so the Xbox and that whole payment scheme, because Microsoft got dragged into this argument because of this idea of what is an experience, what is a video game, blah blah blah, and Microsoft gets pulled into this because Epic deals with Microsoft as much as they do with Apple. Now, with that being said, Epic. And this might have surprised a lot of people because obviously with the Epic Store being, really at the heart of this issue, we should be, the Epic Store should be able to put software directly on iPhones through their Epic Store. You would think that, obviously they stand to make a lot of money. Turns out the Epic Store itself, they've spent hundreds of millions of dollars in developing this thing. It has yet to turn a profit, and they're hoping, fingers crossed, by 2024, it will have turned a profit. But I got to say, like most software companies, it took Twitter, 12 years to do it? It took Facebook, 8 or 9 years to do it. That's just how tech companies in general are run, though, right? You don't turn a profit for many years.
Well, no, most don't ever turn a profit, and most fail. In fact, Well, the truth of the matter is that the business model is based off the movie The Producers. Did you ever see this or watch the musical?
The producer, isn't that one where they want to make a movie so bad that they just run away with the money?
Yeah, so basically you get a lot of funds. Yeah, you get a lot of funding, and the movie's so bad, in this case, Springtime for Hitler.
Right.
And it flops, but you keep the investment. That's how these things are. You get venture capitalism, you get all this stuff, you get all these people investing, and the idea is that someone buys the company because you have a certain patent or something, and you don't need to exist as a company. You get absorbed into the stream. And that's how these companies work. Now, social media changed the paradigm a little, but for every Twitter and Facebook, there's a million Zyngas and live journals and all that other crap. Yep. And so when it comes to gaming, though, here's the problem, though, and this is a very, very simple problem, is that there's just only so many amount of nerds out there. And so, like, for a long time, Steam and Valve had this thing where, again, I told you before, it's very hard to be the software manufacturer and hardware. Valve did it, but they did it both with software. They became a storefront. And when they tried to do the hardware thing, it was a huge failure. They're talking
going
about
to do that again, by the way. There were rumors.
They better not. They better not, because nobody wants it. So nobody wants it.
Gabe Newell does, and that's all it takes.
Anyway, look, does it have Mario and Zelda? It's gonna fail. So anyway, but then Microsoft tried to do it, and again, this is the same thing with Valve and Microsoft and Epic. They're all trying to buy the same pie, but there's not enough pie to go around. And before you think this is not true, the version of like Streets of Rage 4 on the Windows Store versus the Game Pass store versus the Steam store versus the whatever store, it's all different. And Epic, by the way, Epic has no room to talk. Epic has been doing some shady stuff of their own. They've been doing these behind the scene deals with exclusivity. They've been giving away people's software for free. I love the Epic store because it's competition, right? It's rudimentary and it's primitive, but it's competition.
That and you know that honestly, that is something that turned me off of Destiny. Oddly enough, was that I was playing Destiny on the Xbox and PC, and you know there was so much content, there was so much stuff that I wasn't getting because I wasn't playing on Sony and PlayStation because they were getting console exclusive content with different guns and cosmetics and stuff like that. They were getting content like 2 weeks before I was, and I was like, I hate that stuff.
That's how it works. I mean,
that's how
I don't like it either. But that's how it works, and that's the problem with it. So, and who knows?
Let's and sorry for cutting off here, but that was number 6. Number 7. Let's go ahead and just keep this moving a little bit. Apple gains a lot by slow walking progressive web apps on the iPhone. So what that exactly means, in theory, there's a way to get software into iPhones that doesn't include the App Store. Like actually, this is just like you mentioned with Netflix. They have web browsers on iPhones. They of course have a wide range of technology to make this work. You can make things work on the iPhone, in a roundabout way. But Apple does not want to make that easy, Yeah.
Well, because they suck. I mean, Firefox built a whole phone around this. Do you remember the Firefox phone? You don't need an app store. We could do everything. Yeah, exactly. Like the reason Google wants to do this is because Google runs OSs that run on the cloud. Like I'm sorry. Remember when Google promised that Chromebooks were going to be just as good as Windows PC because the cloud was going to power everything? You ever used a Chromebook? It doesn't work. So native apps are faster than web apps. It's true because you have access to technology that's on your phone or on your device. So if you try using Twitter on Safari or try using Twitter versus the Twitter app is 1,000,000 times faster. And it goes for everything else too. I just named you an example with Microsoft game streaming because you don't have access to the technology. You got to go through WebKit. You got to go through all this API programming stuff I don't even understand. But the fact of the matter is, it's in Apple's best interest to give a superior performance. And Google knows this too. If Google didn't think apps were important, they wouldn't have a Play Store. But they do because they are better, and you can control them better. You can add updates better. True, the performance of an app store will be dependent on the hardware, but unless you're using like a 20-year-old flip phone, I mean, you probably have a phone that's commensurate and good enough to run Twitter. Right. But I mean, I'm sorry, but your 12-year-old Motorola phone is not going to run Call of Duty Warzone as well as a new one.
Right. And so just to wrap up this article real quick, because I feel like we've touched some of these other points. Number 7 was, of course, progressive web apps and how Apple doesn't want to make that happen. 8 was Apple still worried about malware downloads on the Mac, which, like you said, that's, really the main thrust of why the iOS exists is that, hey, it's security, for in so many aspects. And number 9 is, of course, the CEO of Epic Games has been bugging Tim Cook for about 6 years about this. Back in 2015, it was the first time he emailed Tim Cook directly, and then of course 3 years later he was still trying to send emails in different manners of either trying to charm him or annoy him or cajole him or trying in some way to get Epic onto iOS without having to use the iOS store. So
that's why he has the Epic Game Store. By the way, I think Tim Sweeney's in your state, isn't he? Isn't he North Carolina?
Tim Sweeney, I don't. Yeah. I mean, Epic Games is a Carolina-based.
I think Tim Sweeney's the richest man in North Carolina. So
no, because I'm here. Obviously, I don't know what you're talking about.
But I mean, like at a time in this existence in this world.
Okay.
But you can see what's happening here because this is the same BS that Valve pulled with Microsoft. Exactly the same template. They wanted to infiltrate, Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft. They wanted to infiltrate Microsoft's hierarchy when they come to digital distribution. It didn't work. They made their own thing, and then they cried foul when Microsoft didn't play right. There was probable lawsuits coming up. I mean, Epic wants to sell games themselves, and they see Apple as a competitor. They see Microsoft as a competitor. They see Valve as a competitor, and they're using the court system because I hate to say it like this, I'm oversimplifying, but they were trying to go around the agreements they agreed to. They made licensing with Apple, and they were caught going around that.
Yeah.
And Apple shut them down because of that. If you don't like it, you build your own, which is what they did. I think Apple's probably going to lose the lawsuit, but I don't know if it's going to be a loss that's going to be catastrophic. I don't know. That's my gut feeling. My gut feeling is that Apple's going to win, but it again highlights to the fact that Apple and their business practices are a little dated. The revenue share and that whole thing are dated. So they're going to win, and they're going to win in the court, but they're going to lose in the public eye. That's that's also enough for Epic though. That's enough for Epic.
I also feel like Epic's going to lose in the public eye. Like I have definitely gone from thinking that they were just this poor game development company to seeing no, they're this large company that's trying to get a better, we keep talking about pie, a better slice of the pie for themselves. But hey, that's I hate to say it, that's business. That's what it's all about.
It's also politics. I think it was Kissinger who talked about this with détente. He basically theorized back at, when America was at war with Vietnam, he's like, you don't sit at a table with someone who's not your equal because it presents the perception of equality. Right. So for Epic to be going against Apple, but this is like David and Goliath to some people. Like Apple is so much bigger than Epic, it's not even close. But the fact that Epic may actually score some points against Apple on this it has huge implications for the way a company can dictate the rules of its own ecosystem.
There you go. So, for the sake of a little bit of diversity, I wanted you to comment one more time. You've been talking a lot, so I appreciate that. We have like 3 minutes left, so I want to pack this with one more thing, just so we don't have so we have more to talk about. But MGM, Amazon, we've talked about it here on the show, $8 billion later. And just to, kind of talk about one side of it, which is that James Bond and the people that actually own the, it's one part for MGM to own like the licensing and, Bond films and that kind of thing. But there were I think it's like the kids of Broccoli or whatever, or whatever the relatives of the original creator of it, they still have creative direction over it. So they can determine, if he's still a male or if he's a female. They get to determine, how, what he does in the films. If he suddenly, flips double agent and Bond becomes a Russian spy. I mean, so the creative the creative direction of Bond stays the same, but Amazon owns the right to the films. So that's something. So anyways, overall though, not just Bond, but MGM, Amazon, how do you take this?
I was talking to Herman about this yesterday. I feel bad for MGM because they've been tossed around like a sack for a long time. And the last time their company was absorbed that had an influence, where the company that bought them actually influenced the Bond movies, was during Casino Royale in 2006. If you go back and watch that, it's everything Bond uses is Sony. And I think there was some controversy because I think he was drinking Heineken at the time instead of the martinis. So on one hand, you could say, well, that's the company's influence, and that's fine. Amazon is a different type of company because Amazon isn't geared towards movies that way. They're geared towards content and media acquisition. So I don't know. All I know is that I just want to see the new Bond movie. And the movie keeps getting pillared around for release dates because of COVID or whatever. But from what I've heard on the street, it's not very good. And that might be the real reason. And so because
but even if it's not very good, you got to know that, a Bond film is a Bond film is a Bond film. It is an international not keynote.
Can I tell you something though?
What's that?
I don't think it has anything to do with that. The Bond catalog is exquisitely profitable. And people don't understand, like you probably do, but people need to understand the Bond films themselves are a license to kill, a license to print money.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with them. I want 4K remasters. That's all I care about.
4K remasters, and of course, hey, maybe some maybe some reboots of.
Leave Moonraker alone.
No, I'm talking about RoboCop. It needs
no.
Make RoboCop a reboot, but instead of what was the Shadow or the Shadow company that whatever that was in RoboCop, make OCP. That Amazon. Yes, make Amazon the evil company in the RoboCop reboot. Perfect. I love it.
Too close to home, Ben. Too close to home.
No, I think it'll flow so well. So everyone, computeramerica.com, popzara.com if you want to see more. And of course, from Nathan's team, they do a lot of great stuff. You can see it all there. And of course, we'll have a link to it on our site. Nathan, thank you so much for joining us. That was, I'm sure that didn't go the way you thought it'd go, but thank you for joining us.
Happy Memorial Day. Stay safe.
Happy Memorial Day. And everyone, we'll catch you next time. Everyone, have a good one. Bye-bye.